Welcome to the Practical Tips channel. I'm Matt, your host, providing practical tips to make your life better. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more tips. Today we're going to talk about color codes for your car, part 2. That's right, car color codes, part 2. Now these color codes have to do with liquids or fluids that are in your car. So these are things that are essential to your car for it to run right. And one of the main things you want to do is make sure that you're not leaking any of these, okay, from the car. We're going to start off with, of course, coolant, also called antifreeze, and it does to this day perform both of those functions. Coolant is available in two different colors because there's an older formulation and a newer one. The older formulation is a green color. It's kind of this fluorescent or neon green color almost. So it's not what you'd call a real natural looking green, so you wouldn't mistake it for other stuff that's green. It's the older type formula, and the main thing about this is that it's the earlier version and it's considered not as environmentally safe or environmentally neutral, if you will, compared to the newer formula. The main problem with it is that animals, including your pets like dogs and cats, if there was a leak of this on the ground and they found a little puddle, they would find this kind of sweet to the taste, but it's actually pretty toxic to them, so you don't want to have your pets around it at all. You really want to keep them away from it if you do find a leak of this. The newer formula, which is basically a lot better for the environment and non-toxic, it's a red color, and it is supposed to have a little longer life, supposed to be roughly 150,000 mile coolant. They say that, again, it's one of those things, your mileage may vary. How you take care of your car and how you treat it and drive it really makes a big difference. So whether you need to do a coolant flush more frequently than what the bottle may say, that's depending on your driving and maintenance habits. Okay, the second liquid we're going to talk about is engine oil. A lot of us are used to seeing engine oil, especially if it leaks from a car and it's dark, kind of nasty looking, thick black stuff, and that's not the way engine oil starts out, however. When you put fresh new engine oil into a car, it is a clear gold color. It's still thick as far as the consistency, but it is a clear gold color. If it's black, it's got some unburned gasoline in it, it's got some miles on it. Often you will find, however, if your car is leaking engine oil, it will probably be black. So you can expect to see that. Transmission fluid and power steering fluid oftentimes are the same thing. Now, this may depend a little bit on what brand of car you have. In most American-made cars here in the U.S., you'll find that transmission fluid and power steering fluid are the same thing, and they're red in color. They keep updating these periodically, this formulation. So you may see, for example, the brand that GM has is called Dexron, and there's been a Dexron 2 and a 3 and so on, and they come out with a slightly new formulation every once in a while, and you'll see that, and a lot of times the power steering fluid is the same thing. Remembering, of course, that this makes sense because power steering is hydraulic in nature, and automatic transmissions, where you'll see this fluid, of course, are hydraulic pumps. So it's hydraulic fluid, and it makes sense it would be the same or similar. It's a sort of a translucent red color, and it's thicker than the consistency of coolant. Coolant is very close to being watery. There's a lot of water in it, so that makes sense. But transmission fluid is thicker. It's not probably quite as thick as engine oil, but it's quite a bit noticeably thicker than coolant for sure. And generally, you won't find any darkening, really, of the transmission fluid. What you can find sometimes, if it leaks or if you have the transmission fluid actually changed, what happens is there is wear, and the wear causes the inside of the transmission and some of the gears and stuff to eventually kind of release some of these little tiny metal particles from inside the transmission. And it's normal. It's natural. Transmissions and their gears wear over time. If you were to change your own transmission fluid, let's say, you drain that transmission fluid out and you see in the drain pan that it's red. If you see something in there that's kind of a glittery and it looks metallic, that's what that is. That's those metal particles that are from the wear in the transmission. So if you see this leaking, most of the time, if it was on, say, on your driveway and you have a typical light gray cement driveway, yeah, you'll see a red mark there. Brake fluid is a little bit different, and this is going to be maybe a little more challenging to tell for a leak because brake fluid, again, it's a hydraulic type of fluid, so it's thicker. Again, probably not as thick as engine oil, but it's a little certainly thicker than water. And it's mostly clear with maybe a slight yellow tint to it, and it's not going to get darker with use like your engine oil would. There's a couple of cautions about this stuff. Number one, if you have significant wear on your brakes, then if you check the level of the fluid in its little tank or reservoir under the hood, you'll find that maybe the level of the fluid is down a little bit because you've got wear on the brakes, and that's normal. That's fine. And then you just check, usually it's on the lid, what the correct fluid is to put in there. It's all approved by the Department of Transportation, so it's called DOT and some number. So it could be DOT2, DOT3. I think DOT4 is one of the latest formulations that they have come up with. But in any event, it's clear with a little yellow tint. And what you want to do is, if you're going to add a little fluid into the reservoir, open the lid, add the little fluid in there. Be careful not to spill it. Use a small funnel if you have to, but be careful not to spill it, and close the lid up right away, because you don't want to get any water or even moisture condensing out of the air inside the reservoir. Water mixing with brake fluid is a bad thing. It causes the brake fluid to become cloudy, and you'll see swirls in there that makes your brake fluid look foggy instead of clear, and that water could theoretically get into certain places in the brake lines that are metal and cause either some rust or some other problems. And it also, of course, is not going to give you the same braking ability as the fluid because it's not as thick. So you do not want to get water near your brake fluid. The other thing you don't want to do with brake fluid is spill it on your car's paint. This stuff will eat the paint off your car right away. If you get any on there, then rinse it off with water and wipe it down with a rag as soon as you possibly can. I mean, immediately. Just be careful handling that brake fluid. There are some of these things with certain other substances, they get reactive, so you want to be careful. Now, as kind of a final point to this particular tip, we want to help you with checking leaks on the car. If you suspect your car has a leak of some sort of fluid, then obviously you want to verify what exactly is it that's leaking, and then how bad is it? Okay, so what's the best method to do this? Well, number one, obviously you've got to be aware of these colors for all these fluids, so that if you do find a leak, you can tell by the color what the stuff is. So the general approach is you want to take a white sheet of paper, or maybe a white piece of like a corrugated cardboard. It should be something that's white, or maybe a really pale gray, or if you can get like a pale beige or something, a fairly light neutral color, so you can easily tell the color of the fluid that's leaking. You really want to be able to tell what color it is, because that tells you what it is. So you want to put this under your car overnight, let's say. Put a couple of bricks or rocks or some kind of weights on it to keep it from blowing away if necessary, especially if you park outdoors. And then leave this in place all night long and check in the morning to see if you have any stains or anything on this white paper or cardboard, and look at the color of the fluid that you see and make your determination on what that is. Now, if you're still a little uncertain, you can take a rag with you, take your index finger and rub it in the fluid on the paper, and then maybe rub it a little bit between your fingers and see, okay, what is the consistency here? If it's like really thin and clear and runny, it might be water condensation from something. If you see it's thin and runny and it's green or red, then you're probably dealing with coolant. If it's black, you don't even have to touch it, because that's probably engine oil. That's just examples to give you an idea. And then, of course, the next course of action is, once you have verified, yes, you have a leak, you can tell what color the stuff is, and then you can tell by how big a spot of this that there is on the paper or the cardboard. Then you can tell, okay, how bad is this, and do I need to get this vehicle to the shop right away so they can repair whatever this is? They can actually trace down the source of the leak and figure out what this is. One of the things you have to remember, of course, is that gravity obviously is always in play here. So some of these fluids can leak from a variety of locations under the hood, and they're going to run down. So you might find some of these things dripping off a certain part of the engine block, or off the bottom of the transmission, the oil pan, dripping off a part of a suspension parts or something. And that, of course, does not mean that's the origin of the leak. So you have to find out where the real leak is. And at that point, it's just best, I think, that you take that thing to a shop and get it in the hands of an expert, and they can sort things out for you and figure out what's really going on, how bad is it, and what's it going to take to get it fixed. Of course, you really want to be sure that all these fluids are filled. I always recommend when you get a car, I don't care new or used, check your owner's manual and see where you can fill and check the levels of all these different fluids under the hood so you know where they are, what they are, and you can be sure that the fluid levels are as full as they're supposed to be on a regular basis. And in most cases, I recommend if you're not having any issues, you could check this stuff probably once or twice a month. If you have reason to suspect there's a problem, then you probably want to check things at least once a week. But if you do happen to find a leak, be sure, just take it to a shop so they can examine the thing and really get a good idea of what's wrong and what it's going to take to get it fixed so that your car will hold up and last you as long as you want it to. Thanks for watching another Practical Tips video. For more practical tips, be sure to click the like button and subscribe.